here's the story that Ron Wyatt told me before he died. I sat in his living room and talked to him for 3 hours about the Ark of the Covenant. He said, Brother Hovind, I found the Ark of the Covenant. I said, yeah, right. Okay, and I'm Methuselah.
So Ron Wyatt, some people say he wasn't an SDA, but he was, at least he accepted their teachings, okay? He may have had some modified things or whatever, but he accepted Ellen White as, from God. And he accepts the very, at least, well, let me just speak what I'm sure of. He believed some doctrines that certainly of SDA, which I am, by the way, that most people don't accept that aren't SDA. So, but they should. But that's okay. But so he's at least that. I'm not going to say he was an SDA. I'm not positive, but he definitely worked with SDAs. He definitely believes like SDAs. Okay, him and Kent Hovind were friends. Kent Hovind's about Baptist. So when I'm in a good mood, it's like Baptists come from Anabaptists. Adventists come from Anabaptists historically, okay? We have actually a lot in common, and we have certain things that are very different. But we're the same kind of Christians in the sense that just on average, the same sort of kind of things that fell out of the oven down through history from the Reformation and the movement surrounding it. And of course, Baptists have a wide variety of differences the greatest diversity among that quote unquote denomination. But they were friends because Adventists and many Baptists like Hovind are very strong about young earth creationism. And that's probably why they were close, to the degree that they were anyway. They talked and I think visited together at least. That's all I know. But Kent Hovind talks fairly nicely about Ron Wyatt, the unsaved heretic who thinks you can lose your salvation. No, just kidding. So I think they're a good model for how people can interact, at least the way they treat each other or whatever. But anyway, this is something interesting I want to point out. So you don't have to be a Baptist or like Kent Hovind, but I'm going to just something you should wrestle with. So I don't think you should believe how I'll end the video, what it said in the end of the video, because you like Ron Wyatt. That would be a bad reason to believe it. But you shouldn't dismiss it because you don't like it, or if it's news to you, what I'm going to show you. Okay? I don't think you should embrace it or deny it just like in that way. But I think you should wrestle with it, consider it, the implications of it. If you think Ron Wyatt found the Ark of the Covenant and his story is true, then don't agree or disagree on emotion. You should look into it really carefully. That's all I'll say. But it just for FYI, let me present. I'll let you do the deduction. It should be very obvious, the implication.
I'm still around. He said, no, Brother Hovind, I really did. I said, well, tell me about Ron. Now, Ron was a great guy. He was the kind of guy that if I was God, I would let him find all these things because he wasn't out for any glory. He's not bragging about it. He wasn't, not looking for money. Just wanted to, he's a humble servant of the Lord. He had a lot of Seventh-day Adventist teaching in him, which I would disagree with, some of the things they teach. He wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist, but he believed some of the things they believe, okay? He said, I was walking along the north side of Jerusalem and with an Israeli friend of mine, and we're walking along talking about things and, what happened here, because Ron's been a student of Scripture for many, many years, okay, and knew it extremely well. He said, we're walking along. All of a sudden, my left arm stuck out, and I pointed to this garbage dump. There's a pile of rubble been there for hundreds of years, up against the side of this cliff. And there's a road along the bottom. There's a big cliff and, another plateau on top. He said, my left arm stuck out, and my mouth started speaking. And my mouth said, that's Jeremiah's grotto. The Ark of the Covenant's down there. And his friend that was with him said, what did you say? He said, I think I just said that's Jeremiah's grotto and the Ark of the Covenant's down there. The guy said, well, great, let's dig it out. Ron said, no, I got to go home and look at the Scriptures and make sure this is possible. I said, I don't know about this. So he went home and searched all the scriptures. He found out the ark never left Jerusalem. At least it's never told that it left Jerusalem, and it didn't come back. All of a sudden, it just kind of quietly disappeared during the days of Jeremiah. The ark is mentioned up until that point, but it's just gone from the scriptures. Never mentioned again. Now, let's look at 2 Chronicles chapter 26. King Uzziah prepared for them throughout all the host shields and spears and helmets and harbor guns and bows and slings to cast stones. And he made in Jerusalem engines invented by cunning men to be on the towers and upon the bulwarks to shoot arrows and great stones. So Uzziah made catapults, going to fling big stones. These things are on the walls in Jerusalem. Here the Bible tells us that King Uzziah made these. Well, a couple of hundred years later, Nebuchadnezzar comes to take over Jerusalem. He doesn't want his guys walking up to the wall because these guys got these huge machines on top that fling stones, catapults. Uzziah made these catapults to fling big stones. So they would, of course, have some kind of maximum range. I mean, you couldn't fling them forever. So apparently, Nebuchadnezzar built a wall outside the range of these catapults. Object is to starve the people out. A siege. That's, you go, you camp around, nobody comes in, nobody goes out. Eventually they run out of food. And so they built a wall outside the city wall. Jerusalem already had a city wall. They back up a few hundred yards or whatever the maximum range was, build another wall. Nebuchadnezzar did. Inside these two is called no man's land. Catapults can't fling the rocks quite far enough to hit the new wall, and nobody can get through to bring you any more food, so it's just a matter of time till you're starving. After you've eaten all the food, then you eat all the horses and all the cows, and then the rats, and then then you surrender. Maybe. So Ron said he figures that Jeremiah knew they were going to lose. The king was not listening to God's word. God said surrender, they wouldn't surrender. Nebuchadnezzar is going to take over. Jeremiah said, well, I better hide the ark and some of the temple furniture. So he thinks Jeremiah took the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, some of the important temple furniture, took it out at night in between these two walls, outside the city wall, but inside the siege wall, and took it into one of a cave area. And there's caves all over there. It's like honeycomb, this area, little tunnels and big tunnels, and you crawl around and get lost and they never find you. He took it back in one of these and then built a false wall in front of it. And Jeremiah and everybody else went off into captivity. And apparently he died there and didn't get a chance to tell anybody where it was. Or, for whatever reason, people lost track of where it was. And for 2,600 years, nobody knew where the Ark of the Covenant was. Ron spends the next 8 years, I believe he said, digging through this garbage dump, moving mountains of rubble. It's been accumulating for hundreds of years. He said, as they're digging, there's a wall and then a flat place where the road was and a bunch of junk piled up against it. So they're digging and moving all this junk he said, he went over there as much time as he could spare for, I think he said 8 years. Okay. He and his sons, and he would hire neighbor, people over there, pay them to come work moving all this junk. As they moved the pile down lower and lower, they came to 3 squares cut into the rock, into the side of this cliff. Obviously chiseled in by somebody, a couple inches deep, just recessed. He thought, now that is strange. What is this? Three of them. Kept digging down farther and farther through the junk. And they came to a little ledge sticking out, solid rock, with a square hole in it. And there was kind of a truncated pyramid shape stuck in the hole. So he pulls this rock out, and there's a square hole about 2.5 feet deep. Somebody's chiseled this into the rock. He said, yeah, Brother Hovind, here's the plug I took out. He goes over, he's using it for a doorstop in his house up in Nashville. He said, this is the plug I took out. Apparently, this hole was to put a cross in to crucify somebody. And they would keep, when they're not using it, they stick the plug in the hole to keep dirt out of the hole. Right above this were the 3 things set into the rock. He said, I think that's where they put the signs in 3 languages, what the guy's being crucified for, what his crime was. He said, we kept moving more junk out of the way, and we found 3 more holes down a little lower. So they had a ledge where the important criminal was crucified, and then 3 more, 1 on each side and 1 straight in front.
I saw war. I saw bombing. I saw
Right out, folks, it's not dead. When we rehydrated it, this was in Israel. 23 from his mother and one.
The excavation suddenly came to a stop. On a later trip to Jerusalem, Ron entered the cave system alone through the middle door, and for the first time in quite a while he re-entered the chamber with the Ark of the Covenant. To his utter surprise and disbelief, he found the chamber had been completely cleaned out and all the items from the temple were set up. No longer was the Ark in the stone case.
The chamber where I found the Ark of the Covenant has since been perfectly cleaned out. And the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, the candlestick, the golden altar of incense, they're all set out as they were in the earthly temple, except that the Ark of the Covenant is setting against a 12-foot long and 18-foot wide or high wall.
He found the original tunnel was also cleaned out, and he followed it to discover that it did indeed open into Zedekiah's cave. It was not the tunnel he and his crew had opened earlier. In the following years, Ron entered the chamber with the Ark a number of times.
Yes, the tables of stone were found in the Ark of the Covenant. I removed them with the assistance of 4 angels who lifted the mercy seat, which I would estimate weighs about 900 pounds of solid gold. And one of these angels told me to take the tables of stone out of there. He said God wants everyone to see those. And so I took them out, backed up, stood there, frozen in place. And I just can't describe my physical state or mental state or anything else. If I didn't have some physical evidence to prove it happened, I think I had a dream or something. But anyway, they're on a stone ledge right in the same chamber. That's where the angel put them after I handed them to him. I didn't know what to do with them. And I was told that these are to be presented with the blood evidence when the mark of the beast law is passed or enforced. Now, I know everybody wonders about what it is, the mark of the beast. You've heard all kinds of rumors, stories, and all this. I'll tell you quick and simple. If you keep the 10 commandments that God wrote up on those tables of stone, and about which he says in Psalms 89:34, those of you that are writing down text, you'll want this one. He says, my covenant will I not break, nor alter the thing that has gone out of my lips. He spoke the 10 commandments from the mountaintop. He wrote them in stone, and he says, nothing will change, right? If you keep that law, you will receive the seal of God. Soon there will be a set of man-made laws. These man-made laws will require that you break God's 10 commandments. Christ said of the Pharisees, for it is in vain that they do worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. If you keep those man-made laws and break God's 10 commandments, you will receive the mark of the beast.
So, you're going to accept Ron Wyatt's claims, which I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't. I don't have enough evidence to proclaim anything about it. Although I do find the scholars that I've asked questions to about individual findings that he claimed, none of which I engaged with on that issue there. I wouldn't try to convince anybody of that. But when I've looked at tons and tons of video footage and explanation and biblical reading the Bible and seeing what it says about Mount Sinai and what the scholars say and the pathetic answers they give when they deny it. Like they'll look at one thing Ron Wyatt claimed and they'll explain why it's impossible, and then it's like it's clearly not impossible. But even if that is not real, it's like when you see what's there and you compare what's there and you look at the Bible narrative and you see how the places, like I'm thinking of Sinai here, and like the wells, the mountain, the cave on the mountain, the way the land there, what seems to be where the golden calf could have been, and what can be seen from one spot to the next, and the way the Bible describes it, and the rock at Oreb, which Wyatt didn't even find, but it's in the exact right spot when someone else found it amongst the things he found. And when you look at all the details that's documented, and you see that Paul says it's actually in Sinai, which is clearly talking about Saudi Arabia. I don't care what the people, I've heard what scholars say, it's pathetic. They can't believe it. And their livelihoods on the line, because it's kind of like an evolutionist not believing in evolution or something. Now, I'm not saying it's right, but the evidence is overwhelming for at least some of the discoveries, and the way that it's denied is pathetic. And everybody that goes and looks for themselves is convinced. And scholars have reputations to keep amongst themselves, and so I'm not surprised that they don't look closer. But you can make up your own mind. So all I'm saying is I wouldn't try to defend the Ark of the Covenant discovery. I know too much. There's not enough evidence for me to feel right saying it. It's a really amazing story. But my point is just that if you do accept it, and I can understand why you might, just know this. Part of that story is Ron Wyatt claiming to talk to angels that confirmed the mark of the beast is the Seventh-day Adventist view. And so now, should you reject him now because he said that? Well, I mean, you can. I would just say maybe the SDA view is right. The SDA view could be right or wrong, whether Ron Wyatt's a fraud or not. So I'm not trying to say the SDA view is right because of Ron Wyatt. I'm just saying he believed it and he made that claim. So just be aware that because I see a lot of people out there like really zealous about his findings, including whole ministries that are very large in the United States. When you actually look at the theology that surrounds that and the implications of it, it's like, because a lot of Hebrew roots people, because of Michael Rood, think it's legit. But do you realize if you think he's legit, why aren't you teaching the mark of the beast is on Sabbath? Is the Sabbath? I mean, he could be lying about that, but not the rest, I guess, is possible. Or he could be confused, or who knows. But I mean, you could hold to some of the beliefs. I kind of do. I think that some of the things he found could possibly not be legit, and others could. But I'm just careful about judging that because I don't have enough data. But when I see what they found and the way people deny it and the reasons they do, I tend to be convinced on several things. And I'm not going to get into that, but you got to wrestle with that if you don't have a hard time accepting Ron Wyatt's findings from the evidence you've seen. Just know he said an angel told him in the place where he found the Ark of the Covenant, the mark of the beast is going to be about over the commandments, the Sabbath. So anyway, peace out.